All right, super excited about my guest today, Alexey Vermeulen. He is a professional gravel cyclist, previously a rider in the World Tour. Had an amazing conversation with the guy. Just overall, really interesting dude, cool dude. We talked about, his early days in cycling, how he got into the sport, his progression to the World Tour, and what he's up to now, riding around with his dog Willie on his back and racing the professional gravel scene. Really enjoyed the conversation, so here it is. Welcome to the Endurance Matters podcast with your host, me, BigMetz. Today, I'm really happy to have on my guest, Alexey Vermeulen. He's a 29-year-old professional cyclist, father to Sir Willie the Wiener, who is with us today, thankfully, and just generally overall cool guy. Thanks, Alexey, for coming on the podcast.
Yeah, that might be the best intro. Cool guy, I'll take that.
Yeah, when I think about Alexey, I just think overall exudes just coolness.
Yeah, that's more what my identity to be like. He's a cyclist and rides with his dog, but he's just a cool guy.
Yeah.
He's a good human.
Totally. Follow him on Instagram. I think you're going to think similarly about just cool guy vibes. I want to start the podcast off today with an icebreaker question. And so the first question I'm going to ask you is tell me one thing that you're amazing at, like best in the world, and then tell me one thing you're the absolute worst at.
I would put my salmon up as better than almost anybody could ever cook salmon.
Oh, okay.
Really good salmon.
Wow.
It's a dry rub. You gotta like dry rubs.
I'm with you on the dry rub. Yep.
Worst at ball sports. I'm an eldest child. I want to get the best at everything, and I am not good at ball sports. Basketball, baseball, you name it, football. I don't know. It doesn't go where I want it to go.
You know what? Then you picked a good profession.
Yeah.
No hand-eye coordination. Well, very little hand-eye coordination. I'm involved in cycling, maybe mountain biking a little bit more. But what's the salmon trick?
It's not overcooking it, first off, and secondly, it's like a sweet and spicy rub, like a little bit of sugar and a little bit of chili powder. And it's just everyone that has it, it's great. I feel like I just like Googled it one day and I've just like slowly tweaked it, but it's my thing.
You go grill or oven on broil?
Oven on broil.
Yeah, that's the key.
Yeah. Grill, I love grilling. I love like to go like a basic salmon, sometimes just like, but if you don't buy like a good piece of fish, and then I feel like it's hard to make it work best.
Yeah.
So
yeah, we have salmon Monday every night at our house.
We have salmon Monday.
You? Dude, let's hang. This is perfect.
Literally salmon Monday every Monday.
Totally. Yeah. There's another dude who has a podcast, Cody Co. Do you know Cody Co?
Yes.
He calls it Salmon Monday.
Yeah,
this is like a funny joke. But anyways, okay, salmon. We're going to have to do the salmon hangout soon. I definitely want to talk a little bit, obviously, more about who you are, what your background is. I think one of the first real questions that I've got is, who is Alexey? What do you do? And why do you do it?
I have grown up, been educated by, raced bikes my entire life. For a while, I felt stupid for not going to school and kind of just racing my bike. But that's definitely like most of my identity, and I love it. When I was 16 years old, moved to Europe for the first time and kind of went through the whole road circuit all the way up until racing in the World Tour for Jumbo for a couple of years before kind of reevaluating and coming back to the U.S. and now racing gravel in this endurance scene that we have, the Lifetime Grand Prix. I think beyond that, people know me a lot for kind of the person I am off the bike, which is I very much want to be down to earth, 2 feet on the ground. I ride with my dog all the time. I think it's funny to make wiener jokes about it. Consistently trying to create a better place that we're all in. I think that's what I've loved about gravel is that it's so new and so young that I get to be a part of building it and what that means for development riders coming behind me and what that means for people coming who will hopefully kick my ass the next couple of years. But I also get to still be competitive and make a living racing a bike in the U.S., which is crazy to me growing up. So yeah, I can just distill it down. I'm a cyclist that rides with his dog.
Yeah. That's awesome. I mean, you mentioned the Jumbo Visma point in your life. I definitely want to start there because, I know, on the research that I did, I studied a little bit on your time in Europe, racing bikes over there. I'm fascinated with the Tour de France. I mean, we have the Tour de France coming up in a little bit. I'm a big fan of bike racing in general. I love time trials and stuff like that. Just being a triathlete myself. How did you find cycling in the first place, and why did that stick for you?
So my grandfather, my dad's side, who was actually passed, grew up in Holland. And raced before the war, before World War II, and then emigrated to Canada after. Sorry. And we never really did anything crazy like, oh, you're going to go race, but he would come to town and we'd just go for a bike ride. But instead of like a normal, like grandfather, dad, kid ride down the road, all of a sudden we'd ride like 60 kilometers. And I'd realize like, oh, I'm kind of cracked right now. I didn't know what cracked was, but I'm like, I'm kind of cracked right now. And so I think as his kind of love and passion for bikes grew, so did mine. I entered a local race. I actually started in a kids triathlon because my mom was doing triathlons at the time. Most infamous moment for me was running through transition and running the entire race with my helmet on. I did win, but I had a helmet on. It was very demoralizing. And then from there, I kind of just I fell in love with the bike for the odd reasons that most people do. It's a freedom. It was a way to get away. Before you're 16 and have your license, obviously it's just like growing up in Michigan, it was the thing to do. I could get out, I could get away, I could do everything I wanted to do, see everything I wanted to see. And slowly that grew to a point where it was like, I got to go all around the U.S. when my friends were stuck in Michigan. Then all of a sudden I got to go to Europe, my friends are stuck in the U.S. And so the bike started taking me to these places that I never really expected. And I think that's what I fell in love with at first, is that love of travel and experiencing new cultures and new places. And then as I matured and grew up, I realized that I also love this racing thing. It could be my job and I might not have to get a real job.
Yeah.
And I think we all love that. That was me in high school. It's trying to figure out what I wanted to do. I ran cross country all through high school. And then I just had this weird feeling of running just keeps me here. I don't do anything. I don't go anywhere.
Yeah.
But it's very generic, safe, exciting thing. Oh, all your friends are going to school. You can go to school with them. You can run in college. And then cycling is this big unknown in Europe. And I'm really glad I did because it's changed the person I am.
Yeah. How does that happen? Do you get an invitation to go to Europe? Do you just go and rock up and get in the right circles? What was the initial first get to Europe move?
Yes, you can. You can pay to go yourself. Definitely hard that way. When I was growing up, there was quite a pipeline, and it really distilled down like a funnel where, it just started at okay, get local results and then go to nationals, get national results and then go to a national talent ID camp that USA Cycling puts on. Once you are in the percentage there where it's worth it, your power numbers are good enough, they'll take you to Europe and then you have to hack it there and, they'll take you for a 3-week camp and okay, you raced 6 times, how did you do? Racing in Europe is very, very intense.
Yeah.
It's, it's their national sport. It's like football here and it's intimidating when you first get over there. I remember their races, a lot of them are called kermesses, which are a little bit longer than a crit for the lap, probably a 3 or 5 mile lap. And then you do it, 8 or 10 times. And the first time the entire national team's over there, my first time over there, and all of us got dropped in 3 laps. These are the strongest kids in America, right? And it takes a learning experience of believing in yourself enough to push someone else the same as they're pushing you.
Yeah.
And then once you hack it, you feel like you're on king of the world. There's betting boards over there, there's dried fish everywhere. It's such the culture of cycling in Europe is so special. And I fell in love with the romance of riding and became a passion really quickly.
Yeah. Where did you end up living when you first got to Europe?
All over.
Yeah.
I lived in Itzehem, Belgium when I first got over there, when I was 16, 17. After that, we lived in Sittard, Holland, which is on the border with Germany. And when I signed my first couple of professional contracts, we started living in the Ardennes in Belgium. And then from there over to Girona, which obviously most people know. And then one of my favorite places actually I lived in the end was in Austria, in Klagenfurt. There's actually an Ironman there.
Yeah, totally.
Oh my gosh. Austria is one of the coolest countries in the entire world.
I couldn't agree more. I was actually riding with a buddy this morning and we were talking about a race there in September in Zellemsee.
Yeah.
I raced the 70.3 World Championships in Zellemsee and I was telling him this is the sickest place. So I can only imagine living there. It's just totally awesome.
Yeah, it wasn't on purpose. I was dating a girl and I was kind of trying to figure out if Girona's where I really wanted to be. It's funny saying this living in Boulder, but I've never really wanted to be where cycling is the focus of everything. Mm-hmm. I kind of want to that's my entire life beyond it. So how do I meet people outside of that?
Totally.
And so Girona felt very tight. And so when we started dating, she was like, hey, I bought an apartment in Austria if you want to go try living there. And I was like, yeah, sure. And it was such an experience because it was Girona, you go from this place that's similar to Boulder where you could ride with anyone at any time, any day. Mm-hmm. To Austria being there was 3 pros there in this little area. And it was so simple. We would wake up, there's a group chat. No one would ask what someone's workout is or what someone, it's just we'd meet at the corner at 10 a.m. or 11 a.m. or 9 a.m. and you go ride and you'd figure out where you're going and you'd go do your workouts and you meet up for coffee. Like every day we rode together. And there was no stress to it of like, oh, sorry, I got 30-30s, or hey, sorry, I have tempo, you know? And I don't know, that changed my perception of like what the longevity of my time in the sport was going to look like.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's really cool. I mean, you know, you mentioned the Jumbo Visma thing or whatever it was called at the time. How did that come about? And tell me a little bit about what that's like being on, because I think at that time they were maybe one of the smaller budget teams, but now they're obviously like a behemoth. They're huge.
Yeah.
So what was it like kind of being in that system, and maybe some of the people you were riding with or racing with?
Yeah. So at the time, it's called LottoNL Yumbo.
Okay.
It's a team that's transcended right from Rabobank all the way to, at one point it was Belkin, and now it's Jumbo Visma. Path that you get on is very, simple, honestly. It's, I got an email. I at first was like, this is a joke. There's no way they're just sending me an email out of the blue asking me to come over for training camp. And sure as crap, it was. And so wrote back a couple times, and they had seen me race a race in Italy. It's one of the hardest under 23 races in the world. It's called Val d'Aosta. It's like 5 days and 60,000 feet of climbing. And they had been impressed. It's weird. A day that I didn't think I was anything special. I finished 6th on the day. It was like the day that they were impressed by. And push came to shove. They were happy. I mean, the thing that with the World Tour is it's really a high-level business, a lot like F1. And so you need to fit into the power profile and the rider they're looking for, but also the nationality, right? So they had just signed an American sponsor. At the time, it's called Brand Loyalty, which does a lot of loyalty programs. And so they were looking for an American rider, and I fit the bill for that.
Sure.
From there, I signed the same time as like Primoz Roglic. We were great friends. It was really cool because he grew up obviously ski jumping, and he's still, I would tell everyone, my favorite cyclist because just knowing him so much. But we were two international riders on a very Dutch team. And it was just interesting going through that learning curve of like what it's like to be on a pro team together, because neither of us really knew what it was like to be at that level.
Sure.
You kind of asked what it was, what it felt like. And it's very interesting because you do nothing. You just ride your bike, right? Like I was explaining that this morning to somebody. I was, so like gravel, I book my flights, I have the hotel, I rent the car, I go get the car, I drive myself. Like there you show up and you travel with a carry-on because they have everything. They have new clothes for you. They can wash your clothes. They have your bike set up. They pick you up from the airport. They make you dinner. Like it's a different world. And it was really, really special. I think just in terms of like as an athlete, we can all attest to this, like setting a goal and getting there was a really crazy thing. Is like since I was 15 years old, I sacrificed things and left things behind to like go to the World Tour.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of things I wish I would have done in that time, but also like once I got there, I think that was the big thing for me. Is I was like, whoa, I'm here. Now what do I do?
Yeah, totally. What, I guess this might be fast forwarding, and I don't want to brush over the World Tour experience, but like what ultimately made you exit or maybe come back to America? Because it didn't seem like your World Tour, what was it, 4 years?
Yeah, it's actually only 2.
Okay.
I honestly, the biggest thing is I felt like I stopped learning. I love learning. Like now as a gravel athlete, like I don't have an agent. I don't have, like I want to do everything myself. I want to learn. I want to feel like I know what happens post-career.
Yeah.
The World Tour, first off, it's really, really hard, right? Like I think I went in expecting to be better than I was. And I think I could have spent 2 or 3, 4 more years there trying to figure out if this was really what I wanted. But I signed at 21 years old, so I was so young that I was like, if I leave now, I can actually have a career in something else as opposed to pushing through here for a couple more years and seeing if this is what I want.
Yeah.
And so I think that stagnation of like feeling like I wasn't progressing anymore for me was the big push. And then once I moved back to the US and was trying to figure things out, honestly, the pandemic was a big space for me as an athlete, probably for a lot of athletes, to like take a think, figure out what we want to do, and realize that like us as people are just as valuable as events. Because the minute events went away, everyone realized like, oh, interesting.
Yeah.
And so there wasn't really one thing, but I think, by the time I was offered any other contract, it was less than I was making, and all these things just started tumbling down where you feel like you just want more.
Yeah.
And I, when you're that age, when you're 23 years old, you just jump at any opportunity. And I think that was the thing, is I was like, oh, I can do better over here. it's worked out, but it could have been me going to school.
Yeah, totally. Did you know you were going to come back and race bikes, or was there a possibility you were coming back to the States? Like, let's say, for example, the pandemic didn't happen. You come back to the States. There's not much actually brewing here that you thought. Like, what would you have done?
Yes, it's a little tricky. Still dating that girl in Austria, so like that kind of had to peter or run its course. I was like really confident in the decision going into like the holidays and came home and was enjoying time with family, and like freaked out and like signed with this amateur team for like half a year. And then I was finally like in July, I was like, this is so stupid. I raced like April to July, and I was like, this is not fun. And then like really settle on like the off-road stuff as gravel was growing. Is mainly focused on mountain bike at first. And then it kind of just took its course. I think I wanted to race bikes, but I gave myself a year to figure out like what does it look like racing bikes over here.
Yeah.
And so really like 2019 at the end went really well, and that was kind of leading into 2020. And I remember going to Tucson and kind of setting up for a spring training camp, but being like, okay, this is the last year. Like you're gonna give what you got. And that time, a lot happened for me. Like we decided, like my girlfriend and I now, like decided to move out to Boulder. That opened a lot of our opportunities and kind of built on a lot of the content projects I do now. And I think overall gave space to realize that it's a lot about picking the right companies, not following financial stuff.
Yep, totally.
You can attest to that.
Yep.
And that's really hard to do in the moment when you're rushing and moving forward. And the minute you stop racing, you can realize of like, oh, maybe I really do care about like the relationship I have with these people as opposed to making $2,000 more.
100%. I say that all the time, and all of the good partners that I've had in my career have come from a personal relationship. It's very rarely been like company comes in, they offer X amount of dollars, that company stays with you for 10 years. It's the guy who you can have over for a coffee, who you can shake hands with, who you can text and say, hey, I need something, or they can text you and say, hey, we need something, just to have that relationship. I think like from the outside looking in, I don't know a ton about the gravel in the off-road world, but it does seem to me, just like paying attention to your social media and the gravel scene from afar, that it's very similar to long course triathlon, where you need to create your own brand. Like you said, you're on the hook for everything. You're your own travel agent, business manager, agent in most cases. So like, was that a challenge to get, like, coming from the world tour where everything's kind of like, here it is, was that a challenge, or did you feel pretty natural like in that role straight away?
It was pretty natural. I'm a very outgoing person, and I knew that that's what I wanted to do when I left the road, right? Like I think it's nice to have this. I'm young. There's not much left to go back. I have like a savings account, and I was like, okay, I'm gonna fully dive into this, and so I was very confident that I was worth something, and I just had to prove it. I think the biggest learning experience for me was truthfully learning how to actually be valuable to a company. And I think I could talk about this for hours and hours and hours, but it took a call with a woman at Carhartt. Pretty much I got on and started pitching, and 10 minutes later she was like, oh, this is horrible.
She said that to you?
Yeah.
Wow, that's crazy.
It was just she went over and like started explaining things and why this, why that, and how to look at this. And pretty much her point was, if you go into any call anytime with a sponsor you've never talked to and have an assumption of what they need, you're going to fail. Totally. And that's really, really hard to think when you're an athlete, 'cause you're like, oh, why does it matter? They can just give me $5,000. Mm-hmm. They're $1 million company. Who cares? Totally. But that's not how it works. And the best example I can give of this is, so I was like, during the pandemic, I had a lot of friends who, I was still living in Michigan, a lot of friends in Michigan, and I was getting connections to these big companies. Like I talked to the vice president of marketing at Ford. I talked to Carhartt. I talked to like some big Michigan companies. And I was talking to Ford and got to the point with the guy who was just like, I could give you $100,000 on my budget right now and I wouldn't know it went away. The problem is it would cost me double that to train and hire someone to quantify if you're actually bringing value in for us, and then to be able to find space in our social calendar to promote what you are, which is a small niche. Yeah. He's like, not that it doesn't exist. It's that if we come in, we have to come in with millions of dollars and not $100,000, because in the market, that does nothing for us. We have to come in, own cycling, come out. Yeah. And I think that was a big realization for me of like, it is relationship based, but it's also, you have to live in reality. You can't live in delusion and think that like people just throw money at you because you do this entertainment thing. Yep. And so, I think it was difficult at first, but I had these really good learning experiences that weren't demoralizing. They might have been demoralizing in the minute.
Yeah.
But as I've learned, like I would like that kid who felt stupid for not going to college, I would now go up against any of my friends who went to business or marketing school, and I would argue whatever time limit you give us, I could sell more.
Totally. Yeah, it's awesome to hear you talk about that experience because I had a very similar couple of experiences myself. I remember one with Discover Card. I was like on the phone with an executive at Discover Card and like trying to pitch my case for why triathlon was an important thing for them to pay attention to. And she was just like, I do not understand this at all. And I don't think she said it the same way of like, I could give you $100 grand and I wouldn't feel it. But I think that was kind of the sentiment that I got.
And it's crazy in that moment because you think you know everything, right? You've built this pitch out, you've done the work, you think you've researched everything. You're like, oh, they focused on this and this is why it's important. But you quickly realize when they start talking to you about things of like, oh, there's a reason Red Bull's not a energy drink brand, right?
Yeah.
It's a media brand. There's a reason Carhartt doesn't view
100%.
themselves as a clothing brand. Yeah. It's really hard to know before you have that conversation. And I think that was a big learning experience for me of like, okay, get on the phone, have a conversation, and then try to make a proposal and try to have a real conversation. And from there, you'll make a relationship that will lead to something or it will just lead to friends.
Yeah, for sure. I feel like also, I talk a lot about because I've had I have a lot of endemic partners and then I've had some non-endemic partnerships, and I'm sure you can attest to the fact that like getting the ones outside of the sport are definitely a lot more difficult. That's where the big dollars are going to likely come from. But if you talk to a wheel company or a bike company or a nutrition company, chances are someone's in that brand who at least gets it or can be a fan of you or can, live vicariously through you. It's a lot more difficult with the with the non-endemic brands, the ones who are outside of the sport. So I'll have to pick your brain a little bit more to see what you do with those.
I mean, I think it's interesting also to tie this all together. Like you watch Unchained come out right on Netflix right now, and it's for me as a rider. Like when it first started watching with my girlfriend, I was like, oh, I hate this. It's so dramatic. It's so like I can't deal with this. And then slowly I realized like, okay, maybe this is bringing fans or information, education into the sport. And that's what I can hope for, right? Yeah. That it makes it easier for us to have those conversations about non-endemic stuff. Yeah. Because those are the companies that if you spend a year working on trying to explain what it is, the person's probably moved jobs already.
100%.
And that's where it gets really difficult.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, obviously with gravel racing and triathlon, there's this whole additional element of having to build your brand and maintain your brand, continuously fight for what you feel like you're worth and, what the worth of your sport is as a whole. Because, I feel like you and maybe myself are examples in terms of, kind of maybe where the bar should be set. And I always have felt like it's important for us to advocate not only for yourself, but the more you advocate for yourself and the more dollars you can get for yourself, that kind of sets an industry standard. So if you're sitting there taking a lower value across the board, someone who's equal or lesser or lower profile rider, they're not even going to be able to make ends meet,
For sure. And I think the biggest thing when you start talking about that stuff, I think is if I can convince young riders that getting results is just the validation that you're working with that company, that's not a return on investment at all.
Totally.
And the minute you can realize that of like, hey, that's me validating why I'm here. Yeah. Now I have to return the investment. I have to go sell bikes or I have to explain or bring new customers in. Yeah. That's where the real understanding happens. And that is unquantifiable to a point. Yep. But we all know it. It's a feeling. It's a gut feeling of like, I'm doing a positive thing for this company and we're moving forward. Yeah. Or it's, it's not working for this reason or the other and we got to work on something.
Yeah, for sure. So obviously like this is all, it's additional stress, it's additional time. You're always out there, you're making YouTube videos, you're posting on social media, you're obviously putting in the groundwork, whether it's making sure the relationships are fortified and strong and making sure the companies are getting exactly what they need, whether that's product development or content or whatever. But I know for a fact, you're still training hard. So walk me through a little bit about like what the demands of training are now compared to maybe what they were when it was the World Tour and just going out there and nailing the sessions was the key, because like I'm a Strava guy, so I'm always on Strava checking out like what everyone's doing. And like I see you riding there with Willie, but I know you're doing some hard sessions. So like tell me a little bit about the training now.
Yeah, it's a tough one to answer. I mean, I think yes, I still train hard, 100%. I want to be at the front of the sport. I also definitely from the road would say I'm operating at like 80-85% of my capacity. Like I've compartmentalized a lot of everything I do to be like, okay, I want to be a spectacular athlete, the best I can with the time I have, but I also want to set this time aside to make cool content. I want to be there for sponsors. I want to be able to do all the podcasts, all the photo shoots, everything that needs to be done. and not pretend like a race is more important than that, because I can show up to the race, especially in gravel, and you can flat out in the first 10 miles, and you're like, that was sick. I'm glad I canceled a lot of things for that. So yeah, I train hard. I think the reason I think I've been a professional athlete, or what I'm best at, is compartmentalizing things and figuring out where the priority lives at a given time, and then how to kind of figure that out. I think one of my favorite phrases that I used randomly the other day was that if you have one skill set and you're really good at it, and you kind of dig yourself a hole, but your only skill set is digging, there's no help at the bottom of the hole, right? And if you kind of figure out of like, I'm really good at training, but I can't do anything else, if you're not winning every race, it's not valuable. And so, I try to do a good mix. I train a lot. My girlfriend races short course triathlon, so a lot of times I'll go out and do 2 hours by myself, do a couple efforts, whatever I have, come back, and then grab her and Willie, and we'll go ride. And it's just always just figuring out where that, like, what is my workout, what's her workout, how do we fit that together? A lot of times, like, we'll just do one bike difference. So if she's on a gravel bike, I'll be on a mountain bike. If she's on a road bike, I'll be on a gravel bike. And it kind of works out. We're both doing our workouts and enjoying it. And then I think it's like, it really moves past, because we can all attest we have those really hard days, and it's easy to pretend like you're the only one in that and you're just struggling all day. And the minute you can bring some camaraderie in there, it's a lot more fun.
Yeah, 100%. Do you do most of your training like alone or with Sophie, or do you have like a little group here in Boulder that you're like trying to get rides in with?
Mostly with Sophie.
Yeah.
I got a couple of friends that I ride with, but it's definitely I'm privileged to ride at like 10 a.m. every day, which is not the time everyone rides.
Right.
So yeah, I'm also not one. I really want to educate people on like safety with cars and bikes. And a lot of the group rides that go on in every city, not just Boulder, it's really hard to be a part of that when everyone's all over the road.
Yeah.
And you look back and there's 20 cars deep, and everyone's just racing across the yellow line. I don't really want to be a part of that, even if that's fun to me.
Sure.
So it's hard, unless there's a ride that, has cars in front and back and are kind of helping move things, and we have some stops to let cars by. It's hard for me to like want to be a part of big group rides, just because I think that's our biggest issue as bike riders.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. And like, I've been in Boulder 10 years and I've never really done any of those. And maybe that's just because I'm a triathlete and I want to rock up on my TT bike. But I'd go out in like, smaller groups, like 4 or 5 or whatever.
So so good.
I don't really know that same dynamic. Although, triathletes are maybe not known for being, the most conscious when it comes to the cars and stuff going on the road. But, we try our best. You mentioned training with Sophie. I'm interested to hear a little bit more about your guys' dynamic, because before I met you, I've known Sophie, just having swum with her a little bit and having been a fan. Actually, funny enough, this year, I randomly ran into her in the Auckland International Airport Lounge.
No way. I just told me about that.
Yeah, we were like both just randomly in New Zealand. I was doing an Ironman triathlon. She had just won a
Napier.
Yeah, a Napier World Cup.
Yeah.
And so that was like a huge result for her on her path to the Olympic Games. Has she qualified for the Games yet?
When's this coming out?
I don't know. Soon.
After the 20th?
Yeah.
Yeah. So yes, she has.
I assumed that she had gotten.
It's not announced till the 20th. But
Okay. Yes. So Sophie Lynn, Olympian, and so that's your girlfriend, and my wife is Jeannie. Jeannie. And, we're a household of 2 high-performing athletes. Like, you guys are the same, both trying to pursue it at a high level. Additionally, you guys, you both have jobs in addition to riding your bikes and training. So it seems like there's a lot of stuff going on. I'm sure you guys are super busy. Like, how do you guys find that balance? And what do you guys do to spend time together or, like, check out?
Yeah. I think the reality of it is during season, it's a lot of just time on the couch, right?
Yeah.
Mornings and nights. Sophie is by far more impressive than I am. She works as an interface designer for Hammerhead and SRAM. She truly has a second job. The reason I say that is I have a second job, but my job is very much based on when do I want to do something?
Yeah.
She doesn't get to choose those things. She has set meetings and all this stuff. And so I think a lot of what we do is just try to find balance in understanding that the river never flows both ways at the same time.
Yeah.
And so if it has to be that I cook dinner 7 days in a row, that's just how it has to be. That's how it worked out.
Yeah.
And vice versa, or she cleans up or how it goes. It's just a lot of communication. I think I realized at a quite a young age that being a professional athlete meant you had to find someone who just kind of understood that it wasn't that you were devaluing them. It was just a sacrifice you were making to be the best you can be at something. And so, yeah, I would say this year's been by far the most chaotic, with Sophie trying to qualify for the Olympics and me trying to support that and also do my own things. My brother got married in the middle of the year.
Yeah.
So it's just been really busy, but I think it's all just communication and staying on top of it. And then those moments we can get out and, go for 2 hours of riding together and you can just talk, are really nice. And it's nice that they don't always feel like training, even though they are.
Yeah, totally. I mean, it's cool. I mean, you mentioned it, like it'd be very difficult for me, at least, to have a partner or a spouse who wasn't an athlete. I mean, it brings its own set of challenges. I mean, sometimes it would be, you'd think, oh, would it be easier if they weren't trying to pursue this at such a high level? But I think it's a lot more rewarding when you both are on a track of high performance and that person's the only person who's going to understand you fully. So at the end of the day, obviously, it's very worth it. I'm sure we both feel that way. Yeah, like I guess another thing, I don't want to jump around too much, but I want to circle back quickly to the training aspect of things, and I want to touch on a little bit of like a mutual interest that we both have in regards to the time trial. And so, yeah, the first time we actually met was because we have the same wheel sponsor, Envy, and yeah, I got a text message from a random number. It was Alexey, and it was our like sponsorship manager saying, "Hey, can you help Alexey out get some wheels to go to the wind tunnel?" And I'm sitting here being Alexey's a gravel guy. What's this guy need race wheels for? Triathlon wheels. So he comes over to the house, he grabs the wheels, he takes them to the wind tunnel. And then I look back at your results a little bit, and obviously the last 3 or 4 years it's been littered with off-road results and races. Those have clearly been the focus if you pay attention to the YouTube channel or the social media, but there still definitely is this interest in the time trial. You've done it the last couple years. Last year you were 6th in the individual TT. Is this U.S. National Championship? This year 7th. So you're up there, and I mean, in order to be in the top 10, like, and close enough to the winner gets an Olympic spot, right? Yep. Like, what's the motivation around the time trial with all of this off-road stuff? Like, why are you still putting yourself out there in the TT?
Yeah, from a young age, that's what I was most interested in. That's what I wanted to go to Worlds for. That's what I wanted to do. I wanted to go to the Olympics for time trial. I just, the same reason anybody talks about it, like being a race of truth, it truly is. There's no complaints. There's no excuses. It's really just, unless you have a really unlucky day, it's you and the bike and the course.
Yeah.
That's it. I think the infatuation started back when I was truly racing on the road. Like I had a couple really close calls. I was never national champion. Like under 23, I was 2nd. And then I went to the elites and I was 3rd. And then I went to Doha for the world championships and finished 28th. And I was just I just always felt like I didn't put enough in, but I always wanted to be there. Like it was so exciting in the moment to execute a day that was 98% there, and you keep working because you want the 100% day.
Yeah.
And so as I have been on this kind of gravel endurance path, that's a lot of what I've missed. I've missed this true focus on perfection, because gravel is the pursuit of perfection in gravel is very unrealistic because there's so many unknowns and variables. And so it's hard to sit here and say I'll go back again next year because it's really hard to fit time trial training into gravel, but it's a blast. I love it, right? Yeah. And so the minute I had a chance, I started working with Factor, and they wanted to go to the wind tunnel, and I was like, cool, we can make content with Willie, and I'll also get some data. And I was like, oh wow, I'm actually pretty aero. And then you're trying to figure out where the numbers have to be. And I think that's the hard part of you might be able to test this maybe a little bit different with the Ironman and half Ironman stuff. But the problem is going into both last year and this year at Nationals, I knew I wasn't good enough. Numbers are so specific, right? I did 385 this year. I weigh 65 kilos just under. And I knew I had to do 400 to be on the podium. Yeah. It was that simple. Yeah. Unless something catastrophic happened, and that's hard to go into a race, and I'm proud to go and execute the good day, the 98% day or whatever. It's the perfect day for me with what I had. Yeah. But it's also hard going in knowing I'm not where I wanted to be and knowing that 3 weeks out.
Totally. That's such a battle for athletes. And I think you can probably cherry pick. You could go to the Colorado State National Time Trial and you could destroy everybody if you wanted to, just like I could probably rock up to some small level triathlon and win pretty handedly. But the same goes for a lot of the triathlons that I've been doing. They're getting so competitive now, just like these cycling races are, just like Unbound's getting. And like you said, sometimes it's a math equation. I mean, you look back just a couple weeks ago, I raced Boulder 70.3. The guy who won did probably 55 more watts than me, and I weigh 10 pounds more.
It's insane.
And we've got similar aerodynamics, this and that. So it's well, okay, I knew that going in. I trained with the guy 4 times a week. I knew he was going to beat me. So you just got to find, I think, a different level of motivation. And like, yeah, I mean, we're similar age. I'm 31, you're 29. Yeah, I mean, going into those, at least for me, like the big motivator is to just try to extract the most out of myself. So as long as you have that perspective going into something like the time trial of like, look, I'm happy giving it whatever I've got on the day, flying home and saying, hey, I tried my best.
Yeah.
I did the best for my sponsors.
Yeah.
Like, what else can you do? You know?
Yeah. I think it's so true. And it's just crazy to be in those moments. And like, I think everyone thinks it's like, oh, you never know what can happen. Like, you kind of know what's going to happen.
Yeah. You did mention the like unpredictability of a gravel race. Do you feel like that is something that draws you towards it? Because maybe if there are guys who just have a threshold that's like, you know, half a watt per kilo higher, like in gravel, it seems like anything can happen, or mountain bike.
It's hard. I try not to compare road and gravel because they're very different. But I do miss that from the road. I miss mechanicals and crashes being something you encountered and moved forward as opposed to like race ending things. I don't know if that's something I want to change in gravel necessarily because I don't know how that would change the whole ethos of why gravel's been born. But I do, the element of preparation for a gravel race is somewhat fun, right? Like preparing for Unbound is just, you're going to war.
Yeah.
Like Unbound, when I finished 5th one time, my best result at Unbound, and my saddlebag, I had like duct tape and CO2s and zip ties. Like I was ready to just single speed the bike home no matter what happened, right? Like I was ready to MacGyver everything I had to do to finish the race, which is a very interesting feeling. You can juxtapose that to like road racing where you're on the lightest possible bike and you're, how fast can I go up this hill? They're both really awesome, but I think at any given time, if you have a lot of bad luck in gravel, you're going to start to hate that a lot. Yeah. And it's hard to love the training aspect of like preparing to not get a chance to race the finale.
Sure.
As opposed to road racing is very scientific and that can also be annoying. Yeah. But there's a beauty to that as well.
Sure. Yeah, 100%. I mean, you mentioned the 5th at Unbound. You know, just scrolling through some of your results, you had a 2nd at Leadville 2023, and then you've done Unbound 3 times.
Yeah.
17th, 5th, and 12th. Like, from my perspective, that's not a massive body of evidence of work. A 5th already is like, that's amazing on your 2nd attempt. Like, is Unbound the North Star for you? Or is there a different motivator?
I'd love to not be doing Unbound in 3 or 4 years. It's such a stressful race.
Does that take a win?
Yeah, for me to not go back, I think it's just the reality of it. Like I can say that, but I'm also excited every time I show up. The energy around the race is big, but moreover, I don't know what the comparison would be for Ironman, but like it's the biggest race by far. For Envy, the value trumps my feelings, right? Like the reality is I'll be there for as long as I'm racing a bike. It's just a race that it's so chunky and so out there, and 200 miles is so long that the workload it takes to complete that really ruins everything else behind it or in front of it. Mm-hmm. So it's really hard to like say, okay, from January to May, I'm going to focus on Unbound, and then you finish and either goes or doesn't go well. And then from there, you're like, okay, now I got to take a break and figure out how to like rebuild myself.
Yeah.
Which is easy if it goes well. It's less easy if it doesn't. And so it's just trying to figure that out. It's not a race I've ever found like to just be able to ride through and just like keep moving.
Yeah.
I keep trying, but that was the real goal when the first year I did Unbound. I was like, okay, I want to come back in 2022 and I was 5th. I was like, I want to win Unbound. Because 2021 I was 17th at Unbound and then 4th at Road Nationals. And then the next year I was 5th at Unbound and like 12th at Road Nationals. And that's the big goal, is to finish on the podium in both Unbound and Road Nationals. That's the real, like, bringing the relation, like, my two worlds together.
That'd be huge. I mean, like you said, that's just such a complicated training equation. It's like trying to do, like, what Sophie does in short course triathlon and try to do an Ironman in the same season. Like, you just don't see it. So that would be incredibly impressive. I'd love to, like, obviously see the narrative and the story behind something like that. I think that'd be really cool. So I'm going to keep cheering every year. One other question I have about this, like, off-road thing is what are the big differences, I guess, maybe in the training or the preparation for a mountain bike event like Leadville and a gravel event like Unbound?
Yeah. So I think the easier way to explain it is, so our race series, our big race series, the Grand Prix, it's 4 gravel races, 3 mountain bike races.
Okay.
All the races change drastically from like time, distance, and then also just the way they're raced and like, are they at altitude or are they not? So we start off at Sea Otter, which is like a 4.5 hour mountain bike race, which is decently long for a mountain bike race. And then you go into 2 months later into Unbound, which is obviously like massive endurance, got to be strong. And then from there, we go to Tusher in Utah, that is 69 miles and 11,000 feet of climbing. So pretty much up, down, up.
Yeah.
And then from there, we go race like a 40-mile mountain bike race that's like almost sub 2 hours. And so a lot of our season is trying to build this, at least the best way I've found to do it so far, is to build this big base, be a very healthy, fit human that can take a lot on, can kind of get through without being injured. And then going into each race, try to tailor toward that race.
Sure.
So, okay, I'm going into Sea Otter, I'm going to ride the mountain bike a little bit more, I'm going to focus on shorter efforts here. And then the minute you go into Unbound, you can say, the next 2 months, I don't need to worry about long efforts at all. Short efforts at all. I just have to focus on like long tempo stuff because it's just about how efficient I can be eating nutritionally, not having GI issues, stuff like that. And then going into Tusher, it's all about like, okay, threshold climbing. That's it at altitude. So it's like it keeps that dial just keeps moving, which is I think what makes it a little bit fun. You just can't get behind.
Yeah.
Because the minute you are trying to make up fitness in the midst of the year, we pretty much race once every month, which is really hard to like gain fitness and focus on like dialing in the race.
Yeah.
And so it's a lot of pre-preparation.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I feel like with that, like it's kind of similar to a triathlon season. We're not as locked in. I mean, maybe we are a little bit now with the Ironman series, which is forcing you to race 5 70.3s and you have to do 3 Ironmans and 2 70.3s as part of the series. So it's kind of similar in the sense of you've got to be relatively consistent. You've got to kind of prepare yourself right before the race for whatever the demands of that competition are, reset, move on to the next. I guess the good thing about training here in Boulder for that is I always say that this is a place where you can. It's amazing because there's access to anything that you need. Like if you're doing a time trial ride, perfect time trialing.
Yeah.
If you're doing a road ride, perfect road riding. Gravel riding, in my opinion, as a very amateur gravel rider who rides his gravel bike like twice a month, I think the gravel riding here is freaking awesome. Like it's so good, and I've probably explored like 20% of what there is out there, maybe a little bit more, but still very, very good. And I've heard the mountain biking isn't quite as good. Like I guess the question that I'm after here is like, what is your favorite ride or route here in Boulder?
So I ride my mountain bike a lot just because when I'm riding with Willie, it's just safer, it feels like. Yeah. And also then it just like whoever I end up riding with, I don't feel like I'm trying to half wheel someone or anything. Like usually it's easier for me, like not to act like I'm the strongest, but it's usually easier for me to back off or go harder as opposed to them backing off.
Sure.
So my favorite, I ride a mountain bike a lot, usually a hardtail. Probably my favorite ride is tying together all the canyons through these gravel connectors.
Yeah.
And so you can go, usually love to kind of go out east a little bit and come back in, go over Yoder into left hand. You climb up left hand to Rowena. You can take Rowena over to Sunshine.
Yep.
Climb up Sunshine for about 500 feet, and you can go left on Church Trail. It takes you down to 4 Mile.
Okay, I haven't been on that one.
Yeah. And then you can take Church Trail either up 4 Mile to Switz.
Okay.
Or you can into Gold Hill.
Yeah.
Or you can take Logan Mill up to the top. And so there and then you can go from there down Sugarloaf over to Flag.
Yep. And
Flag has 68J on top. So there's all these like I love just kind of skirting that 7 to 8 to 85 foot all the way through all the canyons.
Yeah.
That's probably my favorite. I think my biggest gripe with Boulder riding is in the winter you lose all the fun riding.
Yeah.
Like it's just dangerous to go. It's just icy, and like in Michigan I used to like just ride a studded tire bike and like get through it. You can't really do that here.
Yeah.
Because it's like 70 degrees, then it's -2.
Yeah.
And it's hard to keep up with. But yeah, there's a lot of great riding. And even the mountain bike and people complaining, it's because you have to drive there. But if you just want to ride a little longer, like I ride all the mountain bike trails and it's a blast.
Yeah. Sick. Yeah. I want to get into mountain biking, but I feel like the gravel's got to stop at gravel while I'm still racing Ironmans professionally, because I feel like my technical skill is good enough for a gravel bike, but not good enough to do anything like go over to Hall or ranch or any of that stuff. One final question kind of that I have here before we start wrapping it up. Like we have a mutual sponsor that I mentioned in Envy. I don't know a ton about it, but I looked a little bit into that phase 2 project. You mentioned it earlier in the podcast about giving back to this next generation of riders. That's something that I'm trying to do a little bit on like a very small scale and maybe less of like a public level right now. I definitely want to ultimately do something similar in triathlon, which is trying to like set up this next generation of people to get into triathlons and think that it's cool. seems like you're doing that with the gravel stuff with phase 2. I mean, what's the big goal off the course? Is it this phase 2 thing? Or is there something bigger or like what's the off the bike kind of like driving force for you?
I barely have time off the bike right now. Dealing with my dog. Phase 2 I'm very, very proud of. It's something definitely that like I definitely didn't need to add more to my plate at that given time. It's one of those things that I got really sick of everyone saying like, there's no development because of USA Cycling or because of Lifetime. Like the reality is there's no development because no one just puts their hand up and says, I'll start. To the point of it, the way I pitched it to Neil at Envy was that saying like, hey, I want at the end of 2024 to be able to tell my colleagues, hey, look at what we did this year, go do this with your companies. Not to make this an Envy and Alexey thing that every company next year, Cannondale, Santa Cruz, Trek, you name it, wants to carry development riders and sees value in that, because otherwise you're just going to see the same guys win for the next 5 years, and I don't know why that's fun.
Yeah.
And so that's how it started, the impetus of it, and so it was really cool to see Envy get excited about it. And I kind of had to go a little bit crazy pitching late in the end of the year to kind of find the rest of the budget, but it's just been about how do you create and help all the things we've been talking about, teach a 19 or 20-year-old those things so they learn them before they're 25.
Yeah.
And be able to be a great sponsored athlete and a good human, and then see if they can hack it. Yeah. Like, I don't know the people we picked if they can hack it physically. Yeah. That's the truth. But I know that at the end of the year, I will have given them all of my experience or my beliefs and what it takes to be a good sponsored athlete. And hopefully that translates into them being valuable to sponsors beyond the results they get. So that if they get the results, it's valuable. Yeah. So that, and then I have another project called From the Ground Up, that focuses on born out of the pandemic with another person in Boulder named Ryan Petrie. And the goal of that was just that as people were getting into bikes, there was no explanation of why or how to do anything. Mm-hmm. I think for so long, people had come into the sport because they saw someone else do it. And during the pandemic, it was because gyms closed and people needed mental sanity from their families. Yeah. And so you saw so many people on bikes who didn't know what they were doing. And the point of From the Ground Up was giving people a goal and a way to be educated that was not overwhelming, and kind of turn that narrative from like pros probably aren't the best people to listen to because they're doing it for their own reasons. Yeah. And to kind of give people a community at some of these races. And so that's been a cool project. It's going into its 4th year, crazy enough. And just focus on normal everyday people taking on something that's theoretically impossible and giving them all the tools they need to do it, and riding bikes. And some of them still race, some of them commute now. It's all different, but they're still on bikes, which is really cool.
That's huge. I mean, it's awesome. I know Ryan Petrie really well, and I was paying attention to the project like as it's been going on, and I've just been like, obviously proud of him, proud of you. I think it's like both initiatives are amazing, and they're doing a good thing for the sport, which I think at the end of the day, like that's what I'm trying to do. That's what I'm trying to leave the sport of triathlon with, is just like leave it a better place than when I found it. Sounds like you're doing something, and it seems like you're going above and beyond in cycling, which is really huge. So yeah, it's awesome.
And I think you know this, but like I'll say it on the podcast, you're doing a great job. I think that's what everyone needs to realize, right? Is that it takes all of us doing a little. It's not one person overdoing anything. I'm not trying to show up anybody. Boulder can make you feel, any of these like little niches of sport can make you feel like you're less than at a given time. But I don't know, all of these niche sports, they're special because of that reason, because they're a smaller group of people. And I really love that when you can get in and see impact start, even if it started small. It's really special.
Yeah, you just got to be yourself. That's what I've learned. Just be yourself. Do what motivates you. Do what makes you excited. Like, sign up for the projects. Put your hand up for the things that you like. Don't do the things you don't like. And just proceed with authenticity, which I think is like why you've been so successful. So I don't want to take too much of your time, but I do have some final rapid fire questions.
I'm ready.
If you're ready for them. All right. Number 1, how long would it take Willie, who we haven't mentioned once in the podcast, and he's feeling very self-conscious about that?
He's about to jump off your table.
He's
very dismayed.
Well, this is Willie. How long would it take him to swim 100 meters?
I don't know if I had a bucket of bacon if I could get him to swim 100 meters, but if we could, I would guesstimate. What do you think, Willie? 2.5 minutes?
2.5.
Yeah,
that's pretty good.
He can go both on his feet and in the water. He can go when he needs to.
Totally.
He just very rarely needs to. He's very spoiled.
Yeah, no, 100%. Maybe you should put him in the backpack and strap him to Sophie.
There you go.
And then you guys even.
Then I can maybe beat her.
Yeah, 100%. All right. Would you rather be dehydrated and cramping on 36 or stuck on the peak to peak, shivering in the snow without a jacket?
I'm always prepared, Justin. I'm always going to have a jacket.
Oh, this guy.
I hate 36.
You can be
Peak to
be
peak.
on
Peak to peak.
peak to peak.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'll figure out how to make a fire. I'll make a friend. I'll find somebody.
Yeah, I mean, you can go in the little store up there, knock on someone's
Yeah,
door.
I just like, oh man, I feel like the more I've ridden my TT bike, I've understood why people ride 36, but I hate it.
Really?
I'm like, it is the one place for all the cars.
Yeah, I'm with you.
We should all be elsewhere.
Yeah, I hear you.
Yeah, that and diagonal. I don't understand why anyone rides diagonal.
Yeah.
Like it takes 5 to 8 minutes longer to go through spine.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I hear you. I think because we're all worried about our average speed, unfortunately. All the triathletes, at least.
Yeah.
And we do it in the race and stuff, so I don't
Yeah.
know. Maybe that's the reason why. All right. You have your last $5 at the gas station. What are you getting?
I'm going to get a Kit Kat and some kind of cherry soda.
That is an exceptional answer. I'm a Kit Kat guy through and through. I actually had one in my pocket on my ride on Saturday, and I was so upset because I climbed out of Estes Park to the top, and it was going to be my little reward. Yeah. And the thing is it was like 100 degrees. The thing's just melted, unable to eat. So I was actually really disappointed. Mine's a Kit Kat as well and a Red Bull. But nowadays, I don't even think you can get a Kit Kat and a Red Bull for $5, unfortunately.
If we were in Europe, and it would like the Red Bull flavors in Europe, I'm all about. They're a little different.
Yeah.
The like normal Red Bull, I don't need it.
Yeah, no, I hear you. All right. Who, between you and Sophie, is winning the overall Willy Poo pickup scoreboard?
Oh, by far me.
Really?
She pretends all the time, like, oh, I'll get it. And then it's me having to go pick it up.
Oh, nice. Jeannie's definitely winning our poo pickup scoreboard. Yeah. All right. And I asked our last guest this, so they may have already heard this question, but you haven't. This is the last one. Would you rather only ride your bike 100 miles a week, total training volume, or have to ride your bike everywhere, grocery store, airport, to the race, bike trekking it out there?
I haven't owned a car since I was 16 years old, so I'd say ride a bike everywhere. I mean, it's definitely be annoying at times, but I don't know. I definitely I could make 100 miles fun. You can make 100 miles a week a lot, right? If you climb straight up in Boulder.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I'd probably say that I'd just commute everywhere. I enjoy that. It's fun when you can find that space where it doesn't feel like training and that doesn't feel like commuting. It's a lot of fun for me.
Yeah.
And I also I'm definitely like the European style of I'm all high and mighty. I want to go to the grocery store 4 times a week. I hate getting groceries for the whole week. I'd love to go and just get groceries for each meal.
No, I hear you. Well, cool. That's all the rapid fire I've got. That's the interview for today. Thank you so much for coming on, man.
Yeah, thanks, Justin. It was a
Pleasure.
blast.
Thank you. All right, that was a great conversation with Alexey. Just enjoyed getting to know him more, obviously hanging out with Willy a little bit, and just really enjoyed getting to know more about the gravel scene as a whole, his adventures in time trial racing, and what his plans are for the future and what the impact is that he wants to leave on the sport, because he's a really influential guy in the gravel scene, in the cycling scene, and endurance space in general. So enjoyed the conversation.